Welcome to Nineworks TV, and today we've got a 996 Carrera buyer's guide with a difference. Now, I actually did a buyer's guide years ago. In fact, it's one of the first videos I ever did on this channel. Now, whilst the video is still relevant, we're several years down the line now, and with the march of time, it means new things are being unearthed about these cars, and so therefore it's really prudent that we take a look and examine those in closer detail, particularly off the back of the ever increasing popularity of the 5th generation 911. That's why this video we're going to be studying 10 things you absolutely must check before buying a 996, and it includes some never discussed before topics. Let's take a look. For this video, I've sought the pro advice of Chris at the Porsche specialists Right Tune. They've serviced, maintained and upgraded lots of 996 for years now, including my own, so Chris is extremely well placed to offer relevant advice that's applicable to these cars, which are now anywhere between 20 and 25 years old. Chris, point one is a bit of a curveball really. It's something that certainly I would say is quite often overlooked when it comes to buying 996s, coupe or cab.
Yeah, well, all of them. They suffer from water ingress. Door membrane, if you've had this off for any reason, or most likely because the cables for the window have broken, you nearly always need to put a new membrane on. If not, you can get water ingress into the car. Driver's side, it's unpleasant, but on the passenger side, you've got your alarm control unit, so that will normally cause you all sorts of problems with getting into the car, the car acting like it's possessed, and most likely the alarm going off at 3 o'clock in the morning and waking everyone up. The water can get in is if you get blocked drains. There's some in the front, just by the scuttle, and then on a cabriolet, you've got drains here, sunroof, drains. You've got to make sure that they're clear. If they get blocked, you're just going to get water in the car very quickly. Getting the carpet out and getting it dry is a bit of a palaver because there's a lot of foam underneath the carpet. It's very dense and very thick, and it's very good at absorbing water, and so it can be very difficult to get it dry, and you will end up driving around with something that smells like an old gym bag, which is incredibly unpleasant when you've bought an expensive Porsche.
Yes, definitely. So,
not an old sock.
if you're looking to buy one of these, then absolutely check the carpets, have a good feel, particularly in like the front passenger side.
Get behind the seat and pull the carpet forward and get your hand down there and feel for water. If you got in the car and there's a lot of condensation in there, I'd be thinking, well, I'd be concerned. Just water ingress is an issue.
Chris, point two is one that really kind of hasn't been on people's radar compared to some of the other things we're going to talk about in this video until now, and that's actually bodywork.
I've always said this, but we need to sort of update it. But in the past, no problems with the bodywork, generally speaking, very, very good. We are starting to see some problems now, particularly along the sills, need to be checked, and near the jack-in points. And you can just see in there, can the camera pick that up? It's been nudged here in the past, obviously, by someone or something. Yeah. And then just under here, under the jacking point, it's starting to rust. We've seen some rusty along the sills on some of these seams.
You guys have also started seeing the shells deteriorating where the seams are welded together underneath. Very much a new development. Not something that you guys had seen until fairly recently.
No, we always would have said before, nothing wrong with them, the shells are brilliant.
Another thing I'd like to check or point out actually is, again, like with signs of accident damage, most of these cars up to 2005 have the sticker underneath the front hood. If they're missing, it would point to a respray. So there's not one on mine because that's had a respray, but again, so potential like accident damage or whatnot. So just as a quick check to see if the body warrants further investigation, it's a good idea to check that.
Why is it being replaced? Yeah.
Yes. So, third on the list, brakes.
One of the main problems is brake pipes on these cars, on the 996s forwards. Typically, they run down the sill on the left-hand side of the car. There's one that goes across the chassis at the front, and at the rear it goes over the top of the gearbox. It's going to be difficult showing you this on this video, but it does go up over there, and obviously, for obvious reasons, it's awkward to change because the routing of it, you've got to remove the gearbox. Also, you know, something to consider is to remove these panels here because they can trap a lot of mud and road mulch and everything like that, and then it holds it up against the pipes and can hide a lot of problems, and then it gets corroded. Also, where they're held onto the chassis here, they tend to rust around these points. This one's not too bad, but that can cause a problem. Also, the routing at the front makes it costly for the owner, because you've got to strip a lot out to get to it. It's just something to consider, and obviously it's for your safety. It's the most important thing, you know, is your brakes. The caliper is another thing that can cause an issue because of the construction of it. With the calipers being aluminium and the bleed nipples or bleeder valves being steel, and also where the pipes go in to the caliper, they can often, when you go to undo them, they either shear off or they strip the thread out, and it's not an economical repair. Calipers typically being between 250 and 500 pounds. It can be another thing to consider. When was its most recent brake fluid change done? If it's not been done for a long time, you're probably going to have problems bleeding the system. You might not have a problem with the caliper, but you'll be changing brake pipes, you'll have to bleed the system. You could have further problems as you progress that particular sort of job.
So it's worth almost having a contingency plan for that.
Yeah, and one sort of last thing is the brake discs on these cars. If the car's not used that often, or it's stored badly, i.e. outside, after a lot of wet running or something like that, the brake discs seem to corrode a lot on the inner faces. They seem to have a phenomena on these particular models, and one of our technicians is from a general sector, and he said he's never seen anything quite as bad as Porsche brakes in terms of them getting corroded, being attacked by the weather. If you're someone that's going to leave your car in the street over the winter and use it very infrequently, I'd expect to have a lot of brake disc problems. And it's always on the inside faces of the disc, so it looks fine through the wheel when you're viewing it, and then you can look on the inside, and sometimes you can't even really feel it too badly through the pedal, depending on the corrosion level.
The pipes, obviously, it's a small thing to look at, but it's actually quite labour intensive to replace, so they are absolutely worth checking.
Yeah, it can be labour intensive. It can be a simple, quick job, but if it's one that's awkward to get to, it can end up being expensive. Plus, it can, because of where it fits onto, you know, they fit all together. It can then escalate. You can, you know, be pricing to do one pipe and end up changing 2 or 3 as you chase yourself along.
Chris, point 4 and 5, let's combine both. So IMS and RMS. I think from the owner's point of view, myself owning 3 996s now, the big thing to say is this whole kind of IMS thing isn't as bad as what the internet will have you believe. We
haven't seen it happen that many times. People get them changed, I think, because they're scared.
Yeah.
But
it's still worth checking,
it is, yeah. If it's been done, then yeah, bonus. But just remember, it's not a fit and forget solution. It's a service item, so you need to know which one's being fitted and how many miles you can do before it needs replacing. But we've had problems with all types of aftermarket bearing as well.
So it's worth saying, just in terms of the buyer's guide, where you're saying it's a serviceable item and we need to know when it was fitted, check the paperwork. The paperwork that comes with the car.
Check the paperwork. Most people would have kept it because it would have been an expensive job to be run through or carried out rather. The rear main seal and the intermediate bearing cover plate seal also tend to leak in this area. This one looks relatively dry. There's some sort of misting here, but you'd normally be seeing it wet here, which we can show you on your car. There's a slight weep, So yours is damp here. Actually looks damper higher up, so there's a chain tensioner there, and there's a seal, effectively like an O-ring. Not an O-ring, it's like a seal like you'd have on a drain bung. That looks like it's actually that. But yeah, you'd be looking in this area. If it's wet here, it probably needs the rear main seal or intermediate shaft bearing cover plate seal doing. The rear main seal, I think Porsche redesigned it 11 times to try and resolve the leaks, but they still are troublesome. It often looks a lot worse than it is. I mean, I doubt, is yours even leaking on the floor? No, so it's only until you get underneath it you see a mist. My dad always says oil's a bit like blood. It always looks a lot worse than it is.
So from a buyer's guide point of view then, Chris, if you see that when you're inspecting a car, it's not the end of the world.
It's not the end of the world. Some people think it means that the bearing's about to let go. From our experience, not so much. It's more just an oil leak. If it's really bad, it will need doing. If you're doing other work, then you might be thinking about doing clutch and flywheel at the same time, because you'll be doing it's a lot of work to get there But if you're just doing it to change the seal and it's not that bad at oil leak, it's a bit like, you know, a sledgehammer to crack a nut sort of scenario, you know?
Yeah.
So you might want to be waiting maybe for another 10,000 miles when you are expecting to do a clutch, because otherwise you're going to be covering the same ground twice.
Point 6 on our top 10 things to check before purchasing a 996 is exhaust.
Yeah. Typically, this, as you can see on this, the seams start to go. This one isn't actually leaking yet. It's not done too badly. It looks like it's the original Porsche one. They do last very well. They are more expensive than the aftermarket ones that are available.
When the seams go, that's an MOT fail from the off. So.
Exactly, it's going to be an instant expense of, you know, sort of in the ballpark of £1,000, something like that, getting them changed. Other things to consider, these manifolds, they're normally not too bad, although they look rusty and the bolts are rusty, but if you need to remove them, nearly all the bolts tend to shear off, then you've got to drill them out. It's labour intensive. But generally speaking, the manifolds, etc., are good. And they're not good visually, but they don't tend to fail and blow, is what I'm trying to say. This is a problem. This one looks like it may have been done. You might be better off. I don't know if you can see it there. Yeah, this is a triangular exhaust gasket. These corrode and then they lose, they're no longer connected basically, and then it blows. Relatively easy job. The Porsche system has a stud that's pressed in. We just heat the flange up and knock it out, and then just replace it with a nut and bolt, and then in the future it's easier to change if it rusts through again. Some of these clamps and stuff, sometimes they let go and we have to change them. Generally speaking, the main area is your silencer. It may give you an idea of the condition, overall condition of the rest of the vehicle. If there's a lot of corrosion here, there might be some more elsewhere.
Chris, scored bores. I mean, how common is that? Everyone seems to talk about it being an issue, but really how much of an issue is it in terms of percentage from cars you've seen?
996, not too common. 997 is quite common.
Right, okay.
But you've got to monitor your oil consumption. If it's your car, you'll know. You could look inside the engine, it could look like it's got scored bores, but it might just be wet, some standard wear. Yeah. If it's not drinking any oil, then it hasn't got scored bores. That's all there is. That's all there is to it.
Yeah, okay.
Basically, the inside of the cylinder, or where the pistons get up there, it scores the lining, and that then means it then starts to burn oil. And where you tend to see this is usually on the left-hand side, because it's usually happening on 6, cylinder 6, and then yeah, you just need to check this. Now, if it's black, I'd be worried. Or if it's very, very clean, because someone may have cleaned it on purpose. Yeah. Difficult one, really. But yeah, with a 996, it's not so common.
So for a buyer, if you're turning up and the state of the tips on either side are similar, that's got to be a good thing. If this side is either too polished or too black compared to the other side, then yeah, definitely alarm bells. Okay, Chris, we've spoken about the flat 6 engine on the 996, 986 and 997. We need to talk about transmission as well. I was actually quite surprised to hear like the frequency of issues that you've encountered here at Right Tune for both manual and Tiptronic. More
recently, we've had quite a few automatic gearbox issues. I think that's because they're not serviced so regularly or when they should be. And Porsche also made that more confusing for the consumer by saying that a lot of them are like lifetime fill, which is, you know, well, how long's the life of the gearbox? They're very, very big service intervals, and the oil's not been changed, and it's been in there a very, very long time. You're asking it to do a lot. I think that's the problem. I don't know exactly, but we over the last few years we've done. We personally don't do an automatic transmission rebuild in house. We'll send it to a specialist, but yeah, we have had issues with them. The manual ones, this is manual. They tend to suffer from second gear synchro issue. Mobil developed a special oil called PTX, which was to try and help this. It won't fix it, but it will hopefully help with the change. But they can suffer from things such as, you know, warm bearings. They obviously can have synchros wearing. It can be difficult going in. It could be difficult cold. Then when it warms up, it might be easier to operate. You're just going to have to drive it and see how it feels. If it feels notchy, it shouldn't be jumping out of gear or anything like that. It could be a costly repair doing the gearbox, so just bear that in mind. They can be problematic, but generally speaking, they're not that bad, the gearboxes. But yeah, With the auto ones, common issues when it's been sent off to a place to be rebuilt is the change of brake bands and the valve body. But we more likely have issues with external bits like multifunction switch on the tip boxes, which is relatively easy to change. Again, you need to drive the car and see if it's doing anything strange. I don't want it to be like very clunky when it's changing gear.
Chris, while we're on transmission, I know admittedly we can't see a lot with the cover on, but this being a C4.
There is a front diff here hiding. Just wanted to point out that they can have bearing problems with these, and you should be able to hear that. And if that does happen, this is more for when you own the car, like jump on it quite quickly and get it done, because relatively it's quite cheap to get the bearings changed. If you don't, what tends to happen is it creates a lot of wear in there, and it then damage the internals of this front diff, and then that's a lot of money to replace that, and you still have to change the bearings anyway, so it's a false economy. I'd just say get them done. It sounds like a rumble or a loud, I can't explain it, like a sort of noise, maybe at a certain speed. It's not mega common, but if the bearings have gone, then it is going to damage internals in here if you keep driving the car and then not sympathetic to it.
Arms, Chris, next. There's plenty of them.
Yeah, there are. Lower wishbone or coffin arm, commonly called. Rubber bushes here tend to fail. These have just been changed, and here. This is your diagonal. There's a spherical joint up here where it bolts up to the chassis. They tend to fail and create a knocking noise. These is more of a squeak if they go. You can have trouble getting these apart because that's a steel bolt going for an alley bush and they corrode together. So you've got to chop them out. And then you've got some other smaller arms up here, bolting up to the top of the hub. And you've got, obviously, there's a rear toe arm here as well. Same sort of situation. All of that, your anti-roll bars, shock absorbers, all of this can get quite badly attacked with corrosion. Anti-roll bar drop links as well can fail and start creating a knocking sound.
Really, on your test drive, again, it's listening.
Just listen for rattles and bangs. Yeah.
From my point of view, it's worth pointing out that it's really easy to overlook things like this and just put up with it. It's worth sorting it because, as you say, the handling improves no end. But again, if you're buying a car and you're buying a car maybe kind of similar to this, I mean, this has got quite a lot of money ahead of it, in my view, to turn that around. So if you could find a car that's perhaps had a little bit of that done in terms of cost once you buy the car, you could be saving a few pennies there.
Yeah, but this is not this is fairly like what I'd expect to see on a car of this age if things haven't been refreshed. This is the sort of condition it will be in, this sort of corrosion. Obviously service corrosion is not the end of the world, but what's that going to be like in a few more years' time? Like exactly what you just said. Be mindful that it's going to start to be expensive at some point.
Adding up, yeah.
Yeah.
The final point focuses on condensers and radiators situated at the front of the car. Housed behind large openings in the front bumper, this essentially acts as a large hoover which sucks up leaves and other road debris. The leaves get jammed between the condensers and rads, break down and rot, causing corrosion which bursts the condenser and radiator. It really is a weak point of all water-cooled 911s in truth, but with these 996s being the oldest, you can assume potential issues with rot if you're turning up to view a car and can see debris packed into the far corners of the front bumper, particularly if the condensers look old and crusty. It's by no means a life or death situation, but absolutely something to bear in mind because these really are the Achilles heel of all water-cooled Porsche 911s. So they are your new and updated 10 things to check when it comes to buying a 996. As I said at the top of the video, it's super important to get a pre-purchase inspection where you can. There are a wealth of independent specialists out there that will be able to give you an inspection so that you understand and have full comprehension of just what's ahead of you in terms of monetary outlay. In any regard, you should absolutely have an annual contingency plan, i.e. some money set aside to ensure these cars are properly maintained. It's going to be at least £3,000, okay, if you're going to look after one of these cars diligently. That's about it. Thanks to Chris from RightTune for helping us out with the video. If you have any questions on the 996, pop them in the comments below and we'll do our best to answer them. See you soon.